The Secrets of Dumbledore film did not wow me by any means. I mean, it was cool. It's better than The Crimes of Grindelwald, and I'd say it's about tied with the first Fantastic Beasts film. Recently, they released this movie screenplay in book form, and I picked up a copy thinking, hey, I could probably make a video on this. I didn't know what yet. While reading it through though, I was like, wow, this is actually better than I remembered. By the time I finished, I was like, am I misremembering the movie? Did I actually like the film this much? So I went back and watched the film again, and no, I remembered it correctly. Then that's when it hit me. The screenplay is way better than the film. So me hating myself, I went back and reread the script while simultaneously watching the film, trying to see what had changed, and I found a lot of things. In this video, I'm going to explain why the screenplay worked better than the movie did, and I'll explain why it should have been a book instead of a film.
Oh bloody hell, here we go.
It's no secret that J.K. Rowling just isn't good at writing screenplays, especially when compared to her novels. She had a lot of help with the first Fantastic Beasts film, and it was good. Then she had more freedom with The Crimes of Grindelwald, and it was clear that they gave her too much freedom. There were many things that just didn't come across on the screen but were in the screenplay. The most notable example being the fact that they introduced Lally, one of the main characters in the third film, as an Ilvermorny professor. But this was never stated in the movie, so everybody was like, who the heck is this woman? We didn't know her name, and we didn't know her background, which actually would have been really cool. We had never met anybody from Ilvermorny before.
I'll take it from here. Thank you.
Rowling actually wrote a screenplay that was supposed to take this story to Brazil, but Warner Brothers was like, no, this is garbage. So they brought in Steve Kloves to help her write, the man who wrote 7 out of the 8 Harry Potter screenplays. So now if you look at the credits, it says, based on a screenplay by J.K. Rowling, which I almost feel was Warner Brothers punishing Rowling for not doing well in the last film, because they're just making sure that everyone knows they scrapped her original story. It's sort of unnecessary to be honest, but hey, Warner Brothers hasn't had the best track record recently, so I guess it adds up. Like Lally being in The Crimes of Grindelwald, there were a few characters in this movie that just weren't ever named in the film. For example, one of Grindelwald's allies is a man named Zabini, which is pretty cool because this relates back to Blaise Zabini, a Slytherin boy from the original series.
Amused, Blaise?
The screenplay makes note of this character several times, but the movie just never gives us that information. Then there's also this other girl right here, who again is never named in the film, but the screenplay tells us her last name is Caro, which again references characters from the original series, as the Caro siblings were Death Eaters who helped Snape run the school in the Deathly Hallows.
Yeah, brother and sister, in charge of discipline. They like punishment, the Caros.
And sure, if you go on the wiki, you'll see them named as such, but no. If your viewers have to research who a character is, a character that pops up multiple times, you have failed as a screenwriter. It sort of reminds me of the Star Wars sequel films, as each member of the Knights of Ren had a complex background on the wiki, but in the actual films, you never find out any of their names or even who they are as individuals. There are a few other examples of this in The Secrets of Dumbledore as well. For instance, the screenplay presents us with a Ministry file that never appeared in the movie, and it tells us that the Ministry is trying to track down Dumbledore. That's a pretty big plot point that just never came across in the film, and it's important too because it tells you even more how corrupted the government is, with Vogel being loyal to Grindelwald. Also, later on in this scene, the screenplay says that Dumbledore looks all around nervously as if every shadow is a threat, which of course plays off the Ministry being after him. But again, this just doesn't come across. He's so casual and walks as if nothing's wrong. The screenplay meant for this scene to be suspenseful, but the film just had no suspense. The script also gave us a wanted poster for Jacob saying, "Have you seen this muggle?" Another cool detail that just wasn't in the film. And perhaps the most interesting of these examples was that the screenplay presented us with a newspaper, and it had all sorts of Easter eggs and cool details, all of which show the stamp Dumbledore is making on the Wizarding World with his new discoveries. Things that we've heard about since the very first Harry Potter book, and things that remind us of the Dumbledore from the original series. Also, one of the coolest Easter eggs in the entire screenplay was on this newspaper, as they mentioned Gamp's Law, which refers to the restriction of transfiguration, which again, Dumbledore is affecting. But none of this was in the movie. Just thinking off the top of my head, they could have added this by doing a similar newspaper montage that they did in the first Fantastic Beasts film and in the Order of the Phoenix movie.
You brilliant man.
JK has trouble adapting her skills as a novelist to a screenwriter, and there are small but interesting details that show this. For example, when it refers to the water falling, she wrote out that he smashes like a tree that's been welled. Most screenwriters would just say he fell hard, maybe even adding that there was a bang. Now, if you guys don't know, I studied film in college. It's always been my passion. And while taking film classes, I had to take 5 script writing classes. In all of those classes, all of my professors drove home how important it was to keep it simple and not to add unnecessary details that a book might add. And the worst thing you can do is compare what's happening to something you have to spell out to the reader. Something like a tree falling. Just say that he fell to the ground hard, and you can maybe add that it shook the ground or made a loud noise, but that's really all you need. Rowling is stuck in her ways as a novelist, and it hurts her work on these films because writing scripts is a whole new ballgame. Now, while that's an example of adding something unnecessary, there are actually many things added that were necessary and that add a lot to the story, but that just didn't come across on the screen. And I think this is one of the main reasons why I found reading the screenplay more interesting than watching the movie. They have these little blurbs from people who worked on the movie, and they talk about different aspects that they discussed while developing the characters, beasts, and so much more. It sort of gives it the style of a novel, adding this almost narrator, which I think is a very good thing, because that's the way Rowling wrote it anyway. Because she messed up and wrote the screenplay like a book, having a narrator enhances the narrative. It's a prime example of why this should have been a book and not a movie. Let's just go through the film and I'll point out examples of this as we go. Let's start with Albus and Gellert's conversation in the first scene of the movie. During this, like a novel, they give background on their time together, saying, when they were teenagers, Dumbledore and Grindelwald came up with this plan for taking control of the wizarding world, which is something that's never done in a movie. You never have a narrator the way a book does to give us this information, but as I said, because Rowling messed up and wrote the screenplay like a book, having this almost narrator makes it seem natural, and it happily reminded me of reading the original Harry Potter books. Moving on to Newt's first scene, we have another description as it explains how Newt feels his best and happiest while in nature tracking creatures, again almost like a narrator. In this scene, I was pretty shocked that this fast-paced action scene was actually more exciting in the script than on the big screen, and that's because the script had a whole lot of details that just weren't shown in the movie. For instance, we get that narrator again saying that Newt wasn't the most powerful wizard in the world, but that he put up a good fight because he used the nature around him to help him out. Rather than just outright dueling spells, Newt uses more organic things, sending leaves into whirlwinds or shields. But I've looked at the scene a bunch of times, and not once does he use the nature around him. He's just running, never even sending off a spell. I would have loved to see Newt use his surroundings on screen. That would have been awesome. And again, I don't want to sound repetitive, but this is just yet another prime example of how the screenplay is better than the film. This scene also houses one of the most talked about moments in the movie, as the mother Chillin was hit by a killing curse, but she didn't die right away. Something that myself and many other fans pointed out isn't right, because the killing curse should kill you right away. But if you read the screenplay, it tells you that the mother's hide around her protected her from the killing curse. And granted, this isn't the best bit of writing, but it at least explains what was going through Rowling's head when writing the scene. She didn't just flat out break the rules she had already established in the original series. Not explaining this in the movie though makes a major plot hole. Instead of putting this in the dialogue the way Rowling should have, she explained it outside of the dialogue, which again works for a novel, but not for a film. It again shows how she has not yet transitioned from a novelist to a screenwriter. Another scene that just didn't come off right was the scene with Grindelwald and the Chillin. To be fair, this is more the director David Yates' fault than Rowling's. We see Grindelwald help stand the Chillin up, and the screenplay goes as follows. For a moment, nothing. Then, slowly, the Chillin's head lifts, its weary gaze meeting Grindelwald's expectant one. Then, it turns away. Grindelwald's face hardens. So it's clear what was happening here in the screenplay. Grindelwald wanted the Chillin to look into his soul and say he was pure of heart, but after looking in his soul, the beast said he wasn't and walked away. This is actually so powerful and so interesting, but now looking at the movie, this in no way comes across. This is partly the visual effects team's fault, which ultimately falls on the director David Yates, because they have the Chillin's head looking all around when it should have been looking right into Grindelwald's eyes as it made its decision. And I made sure I wasn't tripping. I reached out to some friends and even some fans I've grown close with, and I asked them what they thought. And all of them said they had no idea what was happening here either. One of my fans even said they thought Grindelwald just had a fit of anger, and out of nowhere when his face hardened, he killed the Chillin for no reason. Which adds up honestly, because we've seen him do that before.
So needy.
There's another scene that just doesn't come across well, but it worked perfectly on the page, and that was a moment between Kama and Queenie. The screenplay says, just as he passes, Kama's vacant eyes meet hers, briefly a glimmer with intensity as if he were sending her a message. But again, looking at the movie, this in no way comes across. It was not well addressed that he looked at her. He might have for a split second, but not enough to be like, oh yeah, he's looking at Queenie. Then if you look at the next shot where we see them, we don't even see Kama's eyes. How are we supposed to know he's looking at her and sending her a message? Editing was what I focused on most in film school, and looking at this as an editor, what they should have done was add one extra shot of Queenie while he was walking toward the camera, something like this. It's just another detail, a rather important one at that only came across on the page and not on the big screen. Perhaps the biggest scene that left the most questions was the duel between Albus and Credence. I actually made a video explaining exactly what happened here, which I'll link below, but I'll go over it a bit here too. So I had no idea what was happening here when I first saw the film, and based on your guys' comments when I talked about this scene in my review, you didn't either. But thanks to the screenplay, we actually know exactly what happened. They were taken into what's called the Mirror World, a dimension that was never named in the film by the way, and this was magic powered by Dumbledore's Illuminator. They basically went into a reflection that they saw in the real world, and as you can see, this goes both ways. The Mirror World looks into reflections of the real world as well. Then this is really clear when they come out of it, as they come out of the puddle's reflection on the street. He and Credence are now in the street, the world of their duel reflected beneath them in pools of water created by the melted snow. This is actually a really cool concept, and I sort of hated this scene when I saw it in the movie because I didn't know what was going on. But reading this in the screenplay that explained all the hows and whys, it was exhilarating. At this point, I'm just gonna sound repetitive because I have to keep saying it. This is once again another example that shows how much better all of this is on the page than on the big screen, because Rowling just hasn't learned how to make her descriptive details come across on film. The conversation between Albus and Aberforth is a huge moment in the story, and when reading this in the screenplay, I didn't know why this scene affected me so much more while reading it rather than watching it. Taking a look, I could feel the tension as it said this. Within, Dumbledore and Aberforth stand opposite each other, their voices low, but their postures suggesting their discussion is tense. With this introduction, I read their lines like this. Come with me, I'll help you. He's your son, Aberforth, he needs you. Then when I went back to the film, I realized why I felt so much more while reading it than watching it. It's because there's no urgency in the movie. They aren't standing like the script said, they're just sitting casually. And although the script says their posture suggesting their discussion is tense, there's no tension the way they deliver their lines. Albus is more gentle than anything.
He's your son, Aberforth. He needs you.
And looking at the movie, this kind of diminishes the importance of these words. Rowling actually had it right here in the screenplay, and it seems as though David Yates sort of dropped the ball. The most interesting thing the screenplay added by far is some insight on Grindelwald's character. They have a little blurb that says, Grindelwald experienced something unforgivable or even extremely brutal at a very young age, and that was when his hatred of Muggles began. It just grew stronger and stronger, and every passing day confirmed his belief that there's nothing good in Muggles. Having this quote be paired with a speech to his followers at Nurmengard that talked about his hatred for Muggles, it's a game changer. It adds so much to not only the scene, but to his entire character, to all of the Fantastic Beasts films, and even to the original series. I'm so glad that they added this in the screenplay, and I'm hopeful they explore this further in the last two films in the series. Another confusing scene in the movie was the ending fight between Albus and Grindelwald, and once again, reading the screenplay explains everything that the movie couldn't, which just makes you enjoy the scene so much more. You're not sitting there thinking, wait, how did they get here? What is this place? What's happening right now? Having to ask questions like that takes you out of the movie and sort of ruins what was supposed to be this big climactic scene. A lot of fans thought that this was the same magic used for Credence's fight, but now having the screenplay, we realized that's actually incorrect. For the first scene, time in the real world moved on normally while they were in the mirror world, which is evidenced by the screenplay saying this. The world around them seems to continue on as normal. Meanwhile, in the later scene, time was actually stopped, which again looking in the screenplay is described by this. The world goes slowly still as if the rotation of the earth itself were slowing, and later it says, the frozen world around them. Unlike the first scene, which was magic powered by the Deluminator, this later scene was magic powered by the Blood Trough. When the chain of the Blood Trough broke, it stopped time and sent the two of them here. Then the magic that froze time wore off when the Blood Trough smashed, and time moved normally again, nobody knowing that the two had even fought. It breaks in two, and smoke rises from its center. The world begins to rotate on its axis once more, the figures surrounding Grindelwald and Dumbledore coming back to life. Because we have such detailed explanations for both of these scenes, it makes reading them really fun. But as I said, because Rowling couldn't make any of these details come across on film, it made these scenes confusing and boring when watching them. Now obviously, I'm just sharing my experience with reading the screenplay, and I was lucky enough to have a great experience reading it, a better experience than I had watching the movie. And that being said, it doesn't mean I'm right. Although I did study scriptwriting in college, I'm not an expert. I'm just expressing what I saw in the book and movie and talking about what I learned in college, and of course adding my Harry Potter knowledge on top of that. You guys might have a completely different opinion, and hey, that's totally fine. I actually really respect that. I always love reading your guys' comments on opinionated videos like this one. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Did you share the same experience as me? Did you like the book better than the movie? Or did you have a completely different outlook? Did you like the movie better than the book? Let me know. I can't wait to hear you guys' thoughts. For today though, that's all I have for you. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can follow me on Instagram to see more of my personal life, like my cute dog Loki, and some behind the scenes movie flame stuff. I also do similar content on TikTok and Twitter that I do here on this channel, so if you like what I do here, check them out. All the handles are right below me, and links are in the description. Over here are my wonderful patrons. If you want to be featured on the next video, plus get a few other perks, become a patron today. As always, if you liked the video, hit that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great movie flame videos on the way.